Um, People all over the world, including our own great nation, regard the political system in America as the epitome of modern democracy. Set in place by our founding fathers, the United States is a democratic republic. We elect people to represent as a voice for the people, to promote well-being for the greater good. Since its inception in 1787, there have been a number of critics and proposed reforms for the Electoral College, many who see it as an outdated system that defies the principles of democracy by focusing the election on a few swing states in favor of a direct popular vote. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about why the Electoral College is good for U.S. elections. I'll be sharing some of the opposing views and my supporting views. There are also those of us, including myself, who staunchly defend the Electoral College, though maybe not as vocal as its critics. They believe that the system forces candidates to address an array of diverse interests and maintain our constitutional system of federalism. So what is the Electoral College? According to the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration, the Founding Fathers established in the Constitution as a compromise between the election of president by a vote in Congress, that's the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the election of the president by a popular vote of qualified citizens. Here we have the recent candidates, if you don't know, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. And to the right of them, these are actual, our Electoral College voters for the state of Oklahoma. And you have the Democrats on top and the Republicans on bottom. The Electoral College is a process, not an actual place. Not to confuse people. So why do states have different numbers? Why do some have more than others? And as you can see, the path to the White House is a tricky one. Here's a map of the Electoral College and the states and how many electoral votes they have. This is an interesting picture because it shows, according to states, kind of their size of importance across the country. Electors are appointed to each state and the District of Columbia. The number of electors is equal to the numbers of members in Congress each state is entitled to, or simply the number of U.S. representatives plus 2, since each state is entitled to senators regardless of your population. There are 538 electoral votes total, 435 representatives and 100 senators, plus the 3 from District of Columbia. The District of Columbia was allotted 3 electoral votes. It can have no less than the fewest electoral votes of the state, the smallest state, which I believe is, as you can see at the top, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. So opponents of the Electoral College are those who object in favor of a direct popular vote, and they commonly do so on the 4 main points, as you can see here. The possibility of electing a minority president. One way that this could happen was if the country were so politically divided that 3 or more candidates split the electoral votes, obtaining no majority. This has happened. It happened in 1824 and then was unsuccessfully attempted in 1948 and 1968. If this were to happen today, one resolution would be that a candidate could throw the support to the other candidates, their electoral votes, but that would likely to happen. And without a majority in the Electoral College, according to the 12th Amendment, the House of Representatives would choose the president, this would still not give a majority for the national popular vote. And in a direct popular vote, it would introduce a runoff, which would contribute to the already costly and time-effective the cost and time that it already takes to choose a president. I think we all agree that the election process is long enough. Even supporters of a direct popular vote don't seem to approve of a runoff in this scenario either. Another possible way of electing a minority president is if a third party or candidate, however small they are, drew enough from the top two candidates that no one would receive 50% of the national popular vote. This is not unusual, as it happened at least 15 times in this century. It happened most notably with Woodrow Wilson in 1912 and 1916, Truman in 1948, Kennedy in 1960, and Nixon in 1968. Remarkably about the outcomes of this situation was no one seemed to notice and no one seemed to care. The direct popular vote wouldn't help this either without a runoff requiring more than 50% of the vote. And again, not even supporters of a direct popular vote seem to advocate this either. Another issue that opponents of the EC have is with faithless electors. Electors are supposed to vote for, they pledge to vote for the candidate whose states obviously have the majority of support. A faithless elector votes against the majority of your states, like how the state votes. Faithless electors have never changed the outcome of an election, and only 7 have been recorded in the last century. Most often, faithless electors are merely making a statement and not an actual difference. One way is the electoral vote will so obviously go for one candidate that they cast their vote for the other knowing that it won't make a difference. And if people fear these faithless electors so greatly, several states have laws punishing faithless electors. Another reason is they claim it depresses voter turnout. Since each state has the same amount of electoral votes based on population and not voter turnout, states have no incentive to encourage voter turnout. But it's hard to imagine a counter incentive in a direct popular vote situation. A failure to accurately reflect the national popular will. The Electoral College was never meant to. What? They claim that the EC overrepresents rural populations, and if that's so, then the Senate far more dramatically overrepresents rural areas, since each state gets 2 senators regardless of population. Since there have been no radical movements to abolish the Senate, then why should it apply to the EC? If you say that the presidency represents the whole country, then the US Senate does just as much. Urban versus rural areas. According to the 2008 exit polls, 79% of the of voters were from cities and states with populations well over 1 million people. If in a direct popular election, this would leave at least 21% of the population completely out of the elections. Proponents of the Electoral College supported on philosophical grounds that it distributes popular support for the elected president. Enhances minority interests. Small minority groups may make the difference in winning all or none of the state's votes, since 48 states have an all or winner takes all method. And since ethnic groups happen to concentrate in states that have higher electoral votes, they assume importance well out of proportion to their numbers. This also applies to special interest groups, labor unions, farmers, environmentalists. It encourages a two-party system that contributes to political stability. By protecting the president from impassioned, transient, third-party movements, it forces these movements into the two political parties that we have in our country, creating the liberal and conservative spectrum within both parties. It also encourages the political parties to coalesce divergent interests into two sets of coherent alternatives. It also maintains a federal system of government. The House of Representatives represents the states according to size and population. The Senate represents the states equally, and the EC represents each state's choice for the presidency. To abolish the Electoral College would strike at the very core of the federal structure in our Constitution, leading to a nationalization of government, which is detrimental to the states and their sovereignty. In conclusion, opponents of the EC see it as an outdated system defying the principles of democracy, when in reality it forces those wishing to achieve political greatness to consider all of the country's interests, whether it be rural or urban. The EC is not an injustice, but a system of workings that are still effective almost 300 years later, and a tribute to the greatness of our founding fathers.